Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to this webinar delivered by the ISM Trust. My name is Andrew Snowball, Professional Financial Advisor from Lighthouse Financial Advice. Before we begin today, I just have a few points. The content of this presentation is for information purposes only. The information in the presentation is based on our current understanding of the legislation as of the 3rd of April 2019. It is not intended to be substituted for legal or professional advice and should not be relied upon as such. You can contact us about your specific situation, and ISM members can contact the ISM legal team. You can't see me, but you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation displayed on your screen. You should also be able to hear me, but I can't hear you. If you experience any technical difficulties, such as sound quality issues, please let us know in the question box, and we'll make attempts to resolve the issue. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM website at ism.org/webinars. Lighthouse are the professional advisors and preferred advisors for a number of affinity partners and unions across the UK, as detailed in this particular slide here. The aims of today's presentation is to give you a better understanding of employer-based pension schemes, specifically the teacher's pension, any private and personal pension arrangements that you may have, state pension, considering whether you'll have enough income in retirement to meet your lifestyle aspirations, and options available in increasing your income in retirement. So I often get asked, will you have enough income in retirement? This really depends on the individual. But a great place to start is focusing on which income streams you'll have in retirement. So your employer pension, any private pensions that you've amassed, your savings, any income from investments, which will also include property potentially, and state pension provisions. That will give you your base in terms of an income, and then you need to really interrogate your expenditure. As an example, you would expect that in retirement your mortgage payments would have stopped, you would have stopped any pension savings and any regular savings, but you need to also consider any benefits that may have stopped from your employer and whether you'll fund these yourselves. Will you start taking more holidays or spending more time going out to dinner, which again would increase your expenditure in retirement. Also, travel expenses may stop as well or increase. As part of this process, you also need to take into consideration that people are living longer. So how long will your pension savings last? And also the impact of inflation. Now, seeking financial advice will help you in terms of making this assessment. And what's really important regarding this, and the takeaway, is starting to plan and plan early, and then monitoring that plan as you progress. Now we're going to start in terms of the basics around pension. So what is a pension? It's a vehicle that allows you to save for retirement and hopefully provide you with an income that will last you through your entire retirement. In terms of the pension contributions that you make, depending on the type of scheme, you'll receive tax relief on your contributions. Your pension is also able to provide you with a tax-free lump sum at retirement, and you can take your pension from age 55. It's also possible to have pensions both from your employer and private pensions that you've built over the years. What's important to note is that a lot of people don't have pensions or any pension provisions. And the great thing is that if you're on this webinar at the moment, it means that you've started to think about it, or you've started already in terms of your pension savings. So we're going to first look at employer pension schemes. So broadly speaking, there are two types of schemes: a defined contribution scheme and a defined benefit scheme. We'll first look at defined benefit scheme, which has subsets of final salary scheme and career average revalued earnings. So essentially with these schemes, it's based on how long you've worked with your employer, your final average pensionable salary and the accrual rate that's applied to it. There's no link in terms of investment returns or yours and your employees' contributions. There will be a tax-free entitlement, which you can trade for your pension income. It usually provides a spousal pension, which typically will be 50% of the pension income that you're receiving. The career average scheme is slightly different in that you build up a pot over each year. You have an accrual rate that's applied. Your pension is increased in line with inflation. Again, it's not linked to investments, and it does provide a spousal's pension, and you have an entitlement to 25% of the capital value. Now, an employer's defined contribution, this is based on the contributions that you make and your employer makes, and also the investment return, which is a significant difference between the other schemes. Again, you'll be entitled to 25% tax-free cash of the capital value. You'll be able to choose if your spouse can have benefits or should you die. And with recent changes in legislation, there's greater flexibility in how you access these benefits. But because it's an employer scheme, it's limited in the choices that you have. Now we'll focus a little bit more specifically on the teacher's pension. So essentially there are three schemes: the pre-2007, post-2007, and more recently the 2015. Now the pre and post-2007 are final salary schemes, and the 2015 scheme is a career average pension scheme. Now you could have a combination of these or all three. Now with the pre-2007 schemes, it was based on 1/80th of your final average pension and provides you a tax-free lump sum. As I mentioned before, this has now been moved to the career average scheme, which has a later retirement date. The post-2007 was a 1/60th scheme. Again, the new latest scheme is a career average scheme. Now into a little bit more detail regarding the final salary schemes for the teachers' pensions. As I mentioned before, these are based on your final average pensionable salary. So the way that you'd calculate these is whatever your final pensionable salary is, divided by the accrual rate, which would be 80 or 60, depending on the scheme that you're in, and then multiply that by the number of years that you'd worked. This will then give you what your annual pension would be. And it's also important to note that if you're a part-time employment, you're treated as being in full-time employment when these benefits are being calculated. For the career average scheme, it's a 1/57th of your pensionable earnings, and it's index linked. Now what we will do is give you an example of the more recent teacher's pension, just to see how that works. Currently the contribution levels are based on your earnings band, and as you can see we've got the gross and net contribution levels here. With the new scheme, your normal pension age is linked to the state pension. As I mentioned before, it's a career average of your pension earnings, and it's 1/57th of those accrued on an annual basis, which is then uplifted by a rate published by Her Majesty's Treasury plus 1.6%. So this is a working example. So if we assume that in year one, a member earns £40,000. Divide that by 57, that gives you £701 earned in year one. That £701 is then revalued, as I mentioned before, by a rate given by Her Majesty's Treasury plus 1.6%, which gives you £727. In year two, because the member's income hasn't increased, again they get £701. But the accrued benefits from year one and year two are added together and uplifted again by the rate of 3.6% in this particular example. Now, the purpose of this is that as you progress through your retirement savings, through your teacher's pension, the increases are ensuring that you don't lose the purchasing power of your pension. And what that means is that when you come to retirement, your pension has been increased, hopefully in line with inflation. Now, when it comes to taking the pension benefits, you'll have the option to take up to 25% of the capital value as a tax-free lump sum. Now, typically, you'll be given an annual pension income figure, and you'll be able to trade this figure on a 12-to-1 basis. So, as an example, for every £12,000 of tax-free cash that you'd like to take, you'd give up £1,000 worth of annual income. Now, the decision to take a lump sum or an increased lump sum will really depend on your own circumstances. And the things to consider are your age, whether you have any dependents, whether you need the extra income or not. But what's really important is that when it comes to this stage, seek financial advice to understand the options that you have and the implications that this will have on you in the long term. So in terms of personal pension, you may have your own private scheme, and because it's a private scheme, you'd have greater flexibility than what you'd have in an employer scheme, which essentially would mean you'd have more control in terms of the investments and also how you access those pension benefits. Like the managed purchase scheme for an employer, it's a pot that you put contributions in without any employer contributions, and the pot value at the end of your retirement is based on the contributions that you've made and the investment returns. So again, it's really important in terms of the investment decisions that you make to ensure that you get the return that you hope for in retirement. Again, you'll be entitled to 25% tax-free cash. And the beauty of personal pensions is that there's greater flexibility as well in terms of how you pass that unused pension on to your spouse and your children thereafter. So it gives you the opportunity to pass on any unused pension through the generations, which also sits outside of your estate. So to recap, depending on the type of scheme that you're in, you'll receive tax relief on your contributions. And what that essentially means is, if, for example, you make £80 pension contribution or the equivalent thereof, the government puts in an additional £20. There's the ability to receive 25% tax-free cash lump sum. With final salary schemes, there's an accrual rate which will either be 1/60th or 1/80th or 1/57th, depending on the type of scheme that you're in. Care-based schemes, your pensionable salary is increased in line with inflation, so that you don't lose the purchasing power of your pension. With defined contribution schemes for employer schemes, your contributions and your employer's contributions provide you with a lump sum at the end. There is an element of risk which is associated with the underlying investments, but potentially you have greater flexibility in the way that you access your pension than you would from a final salary scheme. The greatest flexibility would be achieved through a personal pension plan, and we'll look at the options available a bit later in this webinar. So pensions freedoms were introduced in 2015, which essentially increased the options that you have when you draw your pension, and also allowed you to access your pension from age 55. And as I alluded to before, the death benefits available are much greater. So essentially you can choose anyone to benefit from your pension benefits should you pass. Currently, if you have unused pension in a defined contribution scheme prior to age 75, those benefits could pass on to your beneficiary tax-free. Post age 75, it will be taxed at their marginal rate of taxation. Now, in the following slides, what we're going to be looking at is examples of pensions freedom, just demonstrating some of the options that you have available, but this is by no means exhaustive. So if we assume the client has £200,000 in their pension pot, they're entitled to 25% tax-free, and the remaining 75% they can draw an income from that pot, which will be taxed at their marginal rate of taxation. So in this example, that would be £50,000 tax-free, £150,000, which you can then draw from on a regular basis. As I mentioned before, it's taxed as earned income. So your first option is Flexi Access Drawdown. So in this example, the client has decided to take their full tax-free cash, which is £50,000. And where the flexibility really comes in is you can choose to either, in year one, take £10,000 as a lump sum at any stage during that year, or have the equivalent of £10,000 drawn on a monthly basis. You can then vary this income in year two to increase it, or decrease in year three. Again, the flexibility will depend on who you have this personal pension with and whether they have this flexibility. But the important thing to be aware of is that this flexibility is available. And then you can change it as you go along. Again, with defined contribution schemes, it's important to remember that you, along with your financial advisor, if you have one, are responsible to managing the longevity of the pension. And by that I mean you are responsible for making that last. So it's really important to be aware of how much income you're drawing from it and the return that the underlying investment is providing. So the other option is uncrystallised funds pension lump sum, which just rolls off the tongue. And essentially what this means is that you have the option to take withdrawals from your pension in lump sums, and those lump sums are made up with a tax-free element and an element that is taxed at your marginal rate. So in this example, the same client has £200,000, but in year one, they wish to withdraw only £20,000. They're not accessing, as in the previous example, their full 25% allowance. So they take out £20,000, 25% of that is tax-free, which is £5,000, £15,000 is taxed at their marginal rate of taxation. The benefit of this option is if you don't need the income or the tax-free cash, the maximum levels, you can defer that. And because your residual funds are invested, there's the opportunity to increase the potential tax-free cash and income that you haven't taken in year one. And again, as in the other example, you're able to change the way that you access and the level of access in subsequent years. A reason why you might want to do this is to be able to manage the tax that you pay, keeping it within particular tax bands depending on the other income streams that you have in retirement. And an option that's always available to you is whether to use your pension funds in retirement to purchase an annuity. Now, what an annuity does is provide you with an income for life. So that removes some of the risk associated with using drawdown. You could choose to take your tax-free cash and use the residual amount to purchase annuity. So in this example, using £150,000. Or you could use the entire £200,000 to purchase an annuity. Now, the way that annuity works is the more options that you select, this will have an impact on the income that you're entitled to. So again, when it comes to retirement and the options that you wish to take for your specific circumstances, do your research, get advice, and if you don't get advice, there's some free advice available from Money Advice Service to help you with your research in terms of the options that you have available. So old pensions don't die. So a number of clients that I deal with have worked at various organisations and amassed a number of pensions over time. And the problem being they can't remember who the pension administrators are. So to help tackle this issue, the government have a free service called the Pension Tracing Service. And as long as you've got your employer's details, you're able to enter this information in and provide you with details of who the pension administrators are. Then you'll be able to contact them and get the relevant information to either move and consolidate your pensions or at least get a better idea of the options you have available with these particular pensions. There's also the Unclaimed Asset Register, which is a subsidiary of Experian, again, helping you trace potentially lost pensions. And don't forget your partner's past pension history as well. So the importance of this is locating all your pensions, understanding the options that you have available with them, assessing whether it's beneficial for you to consolidate those pensions so they're in one place, have a consistent investment approach, and have the flexibility that you will require when it comes to retirement. As part of your pension planning, something to consider is the lifetime allowance and the annual allowance. Now, the lifetime allowance is essentially how much of your pension you can build up without having any additional taxes applied, which currently is up to 55%. Now, there are protections in place. So again, if you feel that you're approaching this limit or potentially could, it makes sense to seek financial advice to discuss the options that you have available to you to help mitigate that. In addition to this, you're all allowed to save up to £40,000 gross into your pension each year. This includes your contributions and your employer contributions as well. If you feel that you are going to breach this limit, seek financial advice. There are ways to help mitigate or reduce the potential impact of this. If you do find that you've breached the annual allowance, there are methods of paying the additional tax that's applicable through your pension. This is known as scheme pays, and I know it's available through the teacher's pension, but also through private and personal pensions as well. You'd need to speak to your provider to see if this is possible and how to implement that. So before we move on to state pension, just want to reflect on the teacher's pension and some things to consider. Now, if you feel that you want to increase your pension within the teacher's pension, you have the option of purchasing additional years. You also have the option of faster accrual, which is only available through the care scheme or the career average scheme, and also buyout, which is only available through the career average scheme as well. And in addition to that, you have additional voluntary contributions, which presently for the teacher scheme is run by Prudential. And with that, it's a scheme that's funded by your employer, but sits outside of the schemes that we mentioned previously and allows you to make additional contributions. So these are ways of increasing your pension. So with your state pension, it's a flat state pension, and you're now required to have 35 years of national insurance contributions, going up from 30 years. Now, a lot of you may have been contracted out of the state pension. So what I would recommend is if you go onto the government website, you are able to get a state pension forecast, which will show you where you are in terms of your national insurance contributions and also the state pension that you're likely to achieve, and potentially you can make up those payments as well. So currently the state pension is £168.60 per week. So this is the website that you can go onto. Once you create a profile on the government gateway, you're able to get this information online. Alternatively, you can download a PDF document of the BR19 and complete that yourself. It's a longer process, as you can imagine, if you do it by post. Logging on, registering, and getting a forecast shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes. So when it comes to saving for retirement, pensions is the focal point, but it's not the only option you have, especially if you have challenges regarding annual allowance. So in the next few slides, we're going to talk a little bit about investments and alternative options for saving. So when it comes to investments, we really want to consider how long you're going to invest for, what you're going to invest in, your attitude to risk, and your capacity for loss. With any investment, there's a relationship between risk and return. So the more risky the investment, the higher the potential return. The lower risk, the lower the potential return. So you need to always consider that in the decisions that you're making. Broadly speaking, there are 4 asset classes: cash and cash-based deposits, fixed interest, property, stocks and shares. So with the underlying investment, it will be made up of these 4 main asset classes. So the more risky the investment, a greater proportion will be allocated to stocks and shares and property. The less risky the investment, a greater allocation will be distributed to cash and fixed interest. So generally speaking, as you're accumulating and growing your pension, and because you've got a longer period till retirement, the allocation will be more towards stocks and shares and property. And as you approach retirement, what we're looking to do is protect what you've accumulated, so it's likely to be in cash-based products or fixed interest investments. Now, the importance of this is when you have a financial advisor and they're helping you through your retirement journey in terms of accumulating wealth, an assessment will be made through these stages to make sure that whatever investments you're in, it's appropriate to your attitude to risk and appropriate to the level of return that you're looking to achieve. And this goes back to my initial point that have a plan in place, know what your goals are, and make adjustments accordingly. So what other alternatives do you have in terms of saving outside of your pension? So you have ISAs, cash or equity ISAs, depending on your attitude to risk, the level of access you want, and when you want to access the pension. The great thing about ISAs is that they're free from income tax, free from capital gains tax. And it's a great way to save and also generate an income as well. The other options you have are unit trust or exit investment trusts. And investing in these allow you to take advantage of your annual capital gains tax allowance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides and show you how you can combine your ISAs and collectives to generate additional income in retirement in a tax efficient way. It's also important to utilise any allowances that you have. So as an example, £2,000 a year dividend allowance. Other investment vehicles that are available to you are an offshore bond and an onshore bond. And deciding on which one would be appropriate will depend on your own personal circumstances. So in the next example, we're going to see how we can generate additional income by utilising an ISA, as I mentioned before, and a non-ISA investment like a collective investment. So in this example, client is age 65, has a pensionable salary of £40,000, so their annual income from their pension is £40,000. The lump sum that they're able to take from their pension is £70,000, which is tax-free. The client's objective is to generate a tax-efficient income from the medium to long term. So in this example, the clients receive their tax-free cash and they've generously split it with their spouse or civil partner. And they're each going to put £20,000 into an ISA and the residual amount into a collective investment. Now we've made an assumption that 4% per annum income can be generated from the ISA, which would equate to £800 per year. And within the collective investment, the non-ISA, £600 could be generated based on a 4% income. Now, because this £600 is within the dividends allowance, no tax is applicable. And because the income generated from the ISA, no tax is applicable. And if we repeat this from the partner, it means that what you have is an income or an increased income with no additional tax to pay of £2,800 per annum. Now, using the same principles but with a much larger investment amount, we'll repeat the process. So £20,000 going into each ISA for partner 1 and 2, and the residual going into a non-ISA investment, also known as a collective investment. Now this time, in addition to the income generated to the ISA and the income generated from the collective investment, will also be utilising the capital gains allowance. So in this example, the income generated from the collective investment takes us to £2,000, which is within our allowance, so that's offset, no additional tax to pay. Now if we need more income, what we can do is withdraw by encashing or selling some of the units that you hold in the collective investment account. Now because you have £12,000 per annum, any withdrawal is offset against your capital gains allowance. So in this example, for partner 1 and 2, you have £4,140 giving you a cumulative amount of £8,280 per annum. And again, this would all be in a tax efficient way. So to summarise, the total income that's paid out is no further tax applicable. The income from the ISA is not included in your tax returns, and you don't have to worry about capital gains tax on your ISA. Utilising your dividends allowance, any income that exceeds the dividends allowance, you can utilise your individual capital gains tax allowance. Now, a little bit of jargon here, the ability to bed an ISA each year into an ISA. And all this means is that the investments that you hold in collectives, you can move those into an ISA, which is a good way of always using your capital gains tax allowance, but also moving investments into the tax efficient environment of an ISA, which would therefore increase your tax-free income that you can generate from your ISA each year. So it's a great way to make use of all the allowances that are available to you in retirement. So, how can we help? So at Lighthouse Financial Advice, we can help you understand your pension options, help you put a plan in place, help you stick to that plan and create the options and solutions now that will make sure that you achieve your income in retirement. We can help you understand the ways of boosting your income through effective tax planning, understand the long-term implications of the decisions that you make, including taking a large tax-free lump sum figure. When you're dealing with pensions, there's lots of jargon, so we can help you navigate through that as well. A little bit about Lighthouse. We're one of the largest providers of professional financial advice in the UK, with over 140 advisors. We're appointed representative of Lighthouse Advisory Services Limited, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. We act on behalf of yourself, the client, and advise on your specific needs. So no two clients are the same, and we tailor a recommendation to your needs, looking at the market and finding the most appropriate solutions to you. As part of ISM, we offer an initial free consultation, and any subsequent advice that is given after that, we offer different levels of service and payment options. Any information that you provide to us regarding yourself is held in the strictest confidence. We only use information subject to your permission, and we only keep it and use it relevant to the advice that is given. It's important that with any investment, the value of your investment can go up or down, so you could get less back than what you invested. So it's always important that you're in the right type of investment and you understand how that investment works. Tax advice, which contains no investment element, is not regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. A pension is a long-term investment. Your eventual income may depend upon the size of the fund at retirement and future interest rates and tax legislation. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, the information that we provide is generic and doesn't provide personal advice. Please contact one of our professional financial advisors in order that we can provide a consultation, as I alluded to before. Now, we are now at the end of the webinar, and if you have any questions, please use the text box, and I'll be happy to answer those that I can now, and any that I can't, we'll formulate a document and send those out to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this very informative webinar. Please, if you've got any questions, send them through. And as mentioned before, if another question comes up afterwards, feel free to send it to us, and we'll make contact with Andrew and send them through to you. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and send them. Any questions?
So just had a couple of questions come through. Some of these are a little bit more involved. So if I don't respond right now, I have made a note of your questions, and I will provide a written response once I find out a bit more information for you. So please don't think you're being ignored. You will be responded to.
Okay. We'll wait another minute or so. If there aren't any questions, we're going to move on. Okay, well, it seems we don't have any more questions coming through, so we're just going to stop the webinar here. Thank you very much for attending. If Paul?
So one of the questions that we'll respond to now is someone's asked if they're moving from job to job, how do they move money from one pension pot to the next? The answer is that you can do this. So you need to contact the administrator of your existing scheme and ask them for discharge forms. And they will be able to assist you. Depending on the type of the scheme that you're in, you may require financial advice. And also, I would recommend that you get financial advice, because what you don't want to do is inadvertently lose vital benefits or guarantees in an existing scheme by moving it to an external scheme. So that would be my first sort of bit of guidance regarding that. In terms of the other people who've posted questions at the moment, I've made a note of those and will provide written responses to you regarding that.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions?
So someone's asked, what are the benefits of getting financial advice from an external company? I'm guessing this is just a broad question about what are the benefits of getting financial advice. This would be just to give you clarity in terms of the options that you have available, making sure that you're making the right decisions that don't have a negative impact. As I alluded to a moment ago, understanding the pension benefits that you have available and not making mistakes in terms of transfers out, whereby you lose vital benefits as a result of that. Also understanding the tax implications of how and when to draw your pension, also as well as the best methods of accumulating your pension.
Thank you.
So I think the final question is, what can I do if I think my employer is not paying the correct pension contribution? So within each scheme, there'll be details of what their required contributions are. So it'll be very easy to identify this by looking at the current rates that they're supposed to be paying and looking at your pension statement. And then you can query these with the pension administrator to get this rectified.
Thank you very much. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you soon at another webinar.